Thank you, dear Vice President, dear Chair, members of the expert mechanism, distinguished delegates, good morning. It's really a pleasure to be here together with Ambassador Arias Moncada to welcome you to this 10th session of the expert mechanism on the right to development. The expert mechanism, as you've already heard, has achieved important work on a range of key policy and structural issues reflected in its annual report, including on climate justice and climate financing, access to technology, women's participation in development. We thank the mechanism for their reflection on how global negotiations can be strengthened with the principles of the right to development. We also commend the recent thematic study on the individual and collective dimensions of the right to development, shedding light, as it does, on the relationship between the two. It is clearly the duty of states to advance both dimensions. We look forward to the draft study that will be presented at this session on international development cooperation, which is particularly topical in the current context of increased global tensions that are making it more challenging to implement international agendas, including the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Distinguished delegates, it is a good thing that we do have a pact for the future. However, the pact includes a gloomy prognosis of our progress towards the sustainable development goals. UNCTAD and OECD estimate that developing countries are facing a $4 trillion annual SDG financing gap, with more than half of it relating to the energy transition alone. Along with remittances and foreign direct investment, official development assistance, ODA, represents a major source of external financing. While ODA is the smallest of these three sources in developing countries overall, for vulnerable countries, it is often the main source of external financing. And despite the commitment to advance with urgency towards an SDG stimulus, ODA is under pressure, with multiple international crises leaving an increasingly visible mark on both the composition and the levels of international support. This is coupled with a worrying trend of rising military expenditure. According to reliable estimates, worldwide military expenditure amounted to $2.4 trillion in 2023, having risen for 9 consecutive years, and for the first time since 2009, went up in all 5 geographical regions. Ladies and gentlemen, these expenditure patterns and others that we see today run counter to the spirit of Article 7 of the Declaration on the Right to Development that calls on all states, and I quote, to promote the establishment, maintenance, and strengthening of international peace and security, and to that end do their utmost to achieve general and complete disarmament under effective international control, as well as to ensure that the resources released by effective disarmament measures are used for comprehensive development, in particular that of the developing countries. The increase in military expenditure and the trends in ODA that I have highlighted are also contrary to the obligations provided for in the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights to mobilize the maximum available resources, both nationally and at the international level, for the full realization of human rights. Faced by slow economic growth, the spiraling costs of living and other macroeconomic challenges, together with a global public debt that is expected to exceed $100 trillion by the end of this year, developing countries are in need of international support, and urgently so, in order to meet both their human rights obligations and to reverse the very clear trend of SDG backsliding. Dear delegates, dear experts, ladies and gentlemen, as the High Commissioner remarked to the General Assembly Third Committee in New York earlier this month, the world needs a multilateralism that is more effective, more networked, and inclusive. A multilateralism that is better placed to tackle the threats of today and tomorrow. And we must choose justice, sustainability, and peace. And we need to build on the momentum of the Pact of the Future and prioritize investment in human rights. The right to development offers a pathway to build societies that are not only resilient, as we have often called for, but also equitable. It calls upon us to transform how we think about development, not as an afterthought, not as a privilege, but as a human right for all, one that needs to be upheld and protected, especially in these most difficult of times. I wish you fruitful discussions over the next few days. Thank you very much.